Well, hello everyone. I'm Tyler Chrestman, and welcome to this week's Chrestman Conversation. Guys, this week, we can't do it anymore. We can't put off talking about the impeachment anymore. I have been saying for probably the last month, I said we were going to have to do an episode about it eventually, and this is the week, and everyone knows why. This week, the House voted on articles of impeachment and voted formally to impeach the president. Now, we're going to talk a lot about this in the next 30 minutes. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Opinions, views, legality, the whole deal. We're going to just jump into it. Now, I'm going to work off the assumption that we have talked about this a little bit in the past. The reason why Donald Trump is being impeached. We have talked about that. People have a baseline understanding of why he's being impeached, so we're not going to go into that in depth. The question is more, is this a good idea for the Democrats at this point? Is this something that we really should be doing as a country at this point right now? That's the question that's on everyone's mind, because I think the problem for Democrats is trying to convince the American people that this is not some sort of partisan undertaking. And it has not been going well for them in that regard. Because I think most people look at this impeachment inquiry and see it for what it is. Democrats have been saying they wanted to impeach Donald Trump since the day he took office. They couldn't do it on the Trump-Russia stuff, and then it looks like they just moved on to the next thing, and they found something else to impeach him about. And the problem for Democrats is trying to convince people that this one's real. Everyone looked at the Trump-Russia stuff and drew their own conclusions, but nobody dared try to impeach him over it, because what they realized was that some of it didn't look good, but there were no crimes. There was nothing just overt, and they wouldn't have public support if they tried to bring him against him. And then they moved on to this Ukraine thing, and they thought they had public support. They thought starting the impeachment inquiry would generate public support, and what they found is that it has not worked in their favor. And this is a big deal for the Democrats, because going into this election next year, they were hoping that this would be something that might damage Donald Trump. I don't think they ever fully expected to impeach him for real, but I think that what they did expect was that this was going to hurt him at the polls. And what you found, actually, is that it has not hurt him at the polls at all. In fact, his numbers are up. And this is a huge problem for Democrats. So they impeached him this week, and his poll numbers went up because people saw it for what it is. This is a partisan hack job that probably shouldn't be going through. If you ask me about what they're impeaching the president for, just strictly right now, just talking about the Ukraine situation, the phone call with the president of Ukraine, should he be impeached for that? No. Was it a perfect phone call with the president of Ukraine, that the greatest phone call it's ever been, that ever was, according to Donald Trump? No, it wasn't that either. It wasn't the greatest thing ever for the president to toe the line in the way that he did, to say that you need to investigate corruption, and if it happens to include Joe Biden, well, wouldn't that be great? That's not nice. That's not a good thing for a president to do. But is that politics as usual? Yeah. And quid pro quo? Yeah, that's pretty much how politics works. And it didn't rise to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. He wasn't misusing the resources of his office or the American people. He wasn't overtly benefiting from this, because there's a case that could be made, and this was always the case. The case could be made that asking him to investigate Burisma, asking the president of Ukraine to investigate corruption in his country, could have always been made the case that it was about the 2016 election and not the 2020 election. And if it's about the 2016 election, well, this is exactly what Democrats have wanted forever, to investigate corruption and try and figure out who's hacking our election. We know it's the Russians. The thing that I hate that people have been saying is that it was acting like Ukraine interfering in our election is just a conspiracy theory. It's not. There are plenty of Ukrainian nationals who also tried to influence our election, basically as an offshoot of Russia. So it all traces back to Russia, but the idea that some of it didn't take place through Ukrainian assets is not a conspiracy theory. There have been several Ukrainian officials who openly admitted that they were trying to help Hillary win. There have even been some people who wrote public op-eds that were anti-Trump in the election. So Donald Trump, it's not a conspiracy theory. Some of the things that he believes are total nonsense. The thing about the DNC server being held in Ukraine, that just seems like total conspiracy theory nonsense. But the idea that no one from Ukraine may have attempted to influence the election, well, why would we not investigate that? So anyway, this whole thing was not great, but you could always make the case that it was about 2016. And if it's about investigating the 2016 election, it's not impeachable. If it's about influencing the 2020 election, it's impeachable. The problem for Democrats was always you have to prove intent to make this a crime. It's not a crime unless you can prove the intent is to influence 2020, not 2016. And they never were going to make that case. They spent they had a trial in the House. They had the inquiry. It's not a trial, it's an inquiry. They had an inquiry in the House, and only one of their witnesses ever even had a conversation with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump specifically told him, we don't want a quid pro quo with Ukraine. That was their star witness, the guy who testified that Donald Trump explicitly told him, no, we're not looking for a quid pro quo. And so they had nothing. But you knew the day that they announced the inquiry that they were going to impeach him. It was a foregone conclusion from the day it happened. So they impeached in the House. Now, here's the other thing too. And this is the most important point that I'm going to make in this entire thing. The Democrats impeached Donald Trump. They had 2 articles of impeachment that were passed. One had to do with the influence from Ukraine, the call with Zelensky, the quid pro quo, this whole thing. That was the first article. Okay, fine. Now, the second article of impeachment is a gigantic problem. And I don't think enough people realize this. The second article of impeachment was basically they charged him with obstruction of Congress. Now, here's the reason why this is a big deal. House Democrats are behaving as though there is no third check in the system of checks and balances of the U.S. government. They are behaving as though there is no judiciary branch of government. Now, here's what I mean. The Democrats charged Donald Trump with obstruction of Congress, which itself is a nonsensical charge that doesn't exist. The way that it works, Congress is full of a bunch of lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I shouldn't have to explain this to Congress why this is nonsense, but allow me to do it anyway. Congress has the ability to issue subpoenas. Okay? This is important. If you are hit with a subpoena, you have to show up and testify. Now, initially what they did, they didn't send subpoenas to anyone. They sent basically requests for a bunch of people from the executive branch to come testify at Congress. And then they refused. Donald Trump said, no, they're not going to come. Now, the Democrats could have issued subpoenas. And if Donald Trump felt as though executive privilege, for example, could be used, he would fight the subpoenas and they take it to the judiciary through the court system, and the court would then adjudicate who's in the right. They would figure out if you had to abide by the subpoenas or the subpoena could be ignored. But it would go through the third branch of government to settle that dispute. What the Democrats did was send a bunch of requests to the president. He declined, which is his legal right to do, and then they charged him with obstruction of Congress. Now, this is nonsense. Everyone knows this is nonsense who has any idea of how the government works. This has always been nonsense. And so I had a huge issue with this second article of impeachment, because what they did was they didn't charge him with a crime. Obstruction of Congress is not a crime because obstruction of Congress is not a real thing. obstruction of justice is a real thing, but they couldn't do that because he didn't do anything that would fit in that category. So instead they charged obstruction of Congress, figuring that most people won't understand that this is a made-up, trumped-up charge. No pun intended. So I have a huge issue with this one because the Democrats were trying to rush this impeachment through. They didn't call all the witnesses they could have. They could have gotten Trump's chief of staff, for example. They could have had Mick Mulvaney out there testifying. But they didn't. They don't want to issue subpoenas. They don't want to fight it in the court. They don't want to wait. They don't want to do it correctly. So instead they're just saying he obstructed Congress by saying they don't have to come testify. This is nonsense. They know it's nonsense, but they hope that the American voter doesn't realize it's nonsense. And then they'll say, look, he's obstructing Congress, just like when Richard Nixon fired the special prosecutor at the Saturday Night Massacre, Friday night, whatever it was, when Nixon fired the special prosecutor to try and keep the White House tapes. That's what they're trying to make this out as though Donald Trump is standing there and they're trying to investigate and he's just clotheslining everyone trying to walk down the hall to his office. He's saying, no, you can't come in and ask me questions. That's not what this is. It never was, never has been. I absolutely hate that I have to sit here in my nice Santa hat for the holidays, that I have to sit here and defend Donald Trump. I hate that I have to do that. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I've made this clear very many times. I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I'm not planning on voting for him in 2020. I don't particularly like him. Some of his policies have been fantastic. I don't particularly like him as a person. He doesn't meet my criteria to be president of the United States. But you cannot attack him with made-up things. This has always been my critique. You cannot make him be out to be worse than he is and expect me to just go along with it. I don't live in a fantasy world, and I live in reality. In reality, there are crimes and there are not crimes. I walk down the street, that's not a crime. I walk down the street and then trip a police officer, that's a crime. Obstruction of Congress is not a crime. It's not an impeachable offense. It is not a high crime nor a misdemeanor. It is nothing. It is a made-up, trumped-up charge, and Congress is anticipating that the average voter is too stupid to realize that. And it's insulting. It's insulting to people that they have such a low opinion of people that they don't think anyone. They didn't charge him with a single crime in this entire impeachment inquiry because they did investigations and they have nothing in which they can charge him. They can't charge him with bribery, which is what their entire claim was this entire time, that Donald Trump committed bribery with the president of Ukraine. They can't charge him with that because they don't have anything. They cannot prove it. Everyone in Congress is a lawyer, basically. All of them. They're all lawyers. They all know this. So many of them were former prosecutors. The reason why they don't charge him with a crime is because they realize the crime didn't take place, but they don't think people care. They don't think people care that no crime took place. They know that a section of the public hates Donald Trump with such a passion that they don't care what we impeach him for. They were calling for his impeachment from January of 2016 to today. So they know that it doesn't matter what they impeach him for, they did their job. You have people like Rashida Tlaib who came into office and on day one said, we're going to impeach him. Didn't have anything to do, but just now, conveniently, has found a reason. So it's a huge problem. And the whole thing is ridiculous because we all knew. The reason I didn't want to talk about it in the first place is because everyone knew how this was going to turn out. He was always going to be impeached in the House. He's always going to be acquitted in the Senate, and then nothing's going to happen. Nothing at all. And that's what's going to happen. Everyone knows it. Mitch McConnell has said so. This leads me to the other thing, though, that really has bothered me about this entire thing. And that is the behavior of Nancy Pelosi. Especially this past week. So they passed the articles, the House passed the articles of impeachment. And then basically, Nancy Pelosi said, well, we're not going to send the articles of impeachment over to the Senate until we can get the rules of the trial that the Senate's going to hold in order and agree to them. Several things here. Mitch McConnell the leader of the Senate, has come out and said that no crime was committed here. So this is clearly impeachment is a political process. And if impeachment is a political process, then he's not unbiased. He's a Republican. He has said, if it's a political process, which it was a partisan line vote in the House. He said, well, I anticipate it's going to be a partisan line vote in the Senate, in which case there are more Republicans than Democrats, and certainly not a supermajority of Democrats, and he's going to be acquitted. And Mitch McConnell said, that's just the way it is. He also has made it clear that the Senate is in no way responsible for putting together the case that the House couldn't. So the House rushed this trial. They rushed it through. And in doing so, they didn't make a very convincing case. And that is Mitch McConnell's whole point. It's not the Senate's job to make the convincing case for impeachment. It's not a trial in the traditional sense of the word. And he's made it clear that they're not interested in calling witnesses. For example, the House didn't call. If the House wanted to call him, why didn't they call him? That's what he's basically said. You could have waited. You could have fought the subpoenas. You could have done all of these things, and you didn't. You chose to kick it to the House or the Senate, and now Mitch McConnell's in charge. And he has no interest in running a trial that the Democrats failed to put together in the House. So Nancy Pelosi, hearing this, says, I'm not going to send the articles of impeachment over until you do what I want you to do. This is craziness. This is crazy. Now, I'm sorry. Was this whole trial based on a quid pro quo from Donald Trump? Is this not a definition of a quid pro quo by Nancy Pelosi? Yeah, this for that. This for that. This is, what would this be? Bribery or extortion? I don't know which of the legal, I guess bribery technically. But Mitch McConnell doesn't really want it, so it's hard to say bribery. But this idea that Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, a very important role. You don't get to be Speaker of the House and Leader of the Senate at the same time. It's not the way the world works. So she's trying to make rules for the Senate while being Speaker of the House. Mitch McConnell doesn't have to bend to your will. It's not his job to do that. He is the leader of the Senate. He is more powerful than anyone else in Congress. Now, that's a little bit debatable. You could say the Speaker of the House, technically, I think third in line for the presidency, more powerful. But the Senate is a more prestigious body. There are only 100 of them, not 435. So it's harder to be a senator than it is to be in the House. That's why you have all these nut jobs in the House right now. The Senate is relatively calm by comparison. Now, Nancy Pelosi trying to impose rules on the Senate while being Speaker of the House is not good. This is not going to hold up very long, by the way. This is going to go through. And when it goes through, Mitch McConnell's they're going to have a week worth of a trial. They're going to vote. He's going to be acquitted. Nothing's going to happen. Donald Trump's going to be president up until the election. And then who knows? If it's the field that is currently running against him, well, he'll probably be president after that. The biggest thing, oh my gosh, the biggest thing that has happened is watching Donald Trump's poll numbers go up throughout this process. This is a political backfire on the part of the Democrats. Watching Donald Trump's poll numbers go up. Now some of the ones I've seen show him at 44, 45% approval. And you say, well, that's still a minority. That's more than what he won the 2016 election with. It's higher than it's been at any point in his presidency. And that's not good for Democrats whatsoever. This idea that Donald Trump is getting more popular because the Democrats have shown themselves to be partisan in a really ugly way. and just cheapen this whole impeachment process. For the third time in history, a president's been impeached. Nixon would have been impeached, so you could argue 4, but only 3 presidents in history have been impeached. And it is, for this, and it just is so ugly. And I don't know. I just see this being a downfall of our politics in the future. This cheapening of the impeachment process is something that is, a lot of Democrats came out and said, oh, it's a grave day. With a heavy heart, I do this and that. And no, that's not true. You guys have all been cheering and wanting this from day one. And now you have to pretend as though it's really weighing on your conscience to impeach the president. What we've done is cheapen this political process in a way that you're going to see a lot of presidents in the future be impeached. There were a lot of conservatives who made the case that Barack Obama should have been impeached for a number of things. And all I can think of is if Barack Obama followed Donald Trump after this process, they would have started an inquiry, and it just cheapens our politics. That's what this whole thing has done. Anyone who really thoroughly researched the Ukraine business, you really come away from it and go, oh, it's nothing. I made the argument earlier, it was a Rorschach test. If you hate Donald Trump and you read the transcript of his call and you look at the surrounding circumstance, you see corruption and you see evil, you see malice, and you see an impeachable offense. And if you're a Donald Trump supporter or neutral like I am, I don't go one way or the other. I tend to lean more against him, honestly. But if you come into it from a neutral, objective point of view and you read the transcript, you say, oh yeah, this is nothing. And what are we doing? This is nonsense. And that's where I've been this entire time. This impeachment process is nonsense. And it's not good for the country. It's not going to be good for the country. I think the Democrats made a terrible mistake here. And I hope that they recover. This is going to sound terrible. But as a lifelong Democrat, as someone who's always voted Democrat and all my life, there's a little bit of me that hopes that the Democrats take such a resounding defeat that they have to look in the mirror and really reevaluate the direction that their party is headed. If the party is going the way of the squad, then you're not going to win another election. It's just going to be a downward slope. And the Twitter Democrats need to just go away. And we need to get more moderate Democrats to the table. I don't see it happening, which is why I feel so disheartened about this next election. We're going to have a president who's been through an impeachment and probably an out and about socialist on the other side. And you say, wow, congratulations, America. You are terrible at choosing candidates. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Again, this impeachment thing's going nowhere. It's going nowhere, people. It always was. It was always destined to go this way. I said it from the beginning. He was going to be impeached in the House. It was always going to happen. He's not going to get... a supermajority is required to remove the president from office. A supermajority. The Democrats don't even have a majority. They're not going to get a supermajority. It will never happen. Ever. Public opinion on impeachment did not swing the way the Democrats wished. You're not going to peel off Republicans without overwhelming majority of support for impeachment, and you don't even have it. You don't have any of it. Less Americans approve of the impeachment than when we started. It was not the way it was supposed to go for Democrats. It's not the way it went for Nixon. If I remember correctly, Nixon had... The public didn't support an impeachment inquiry until the impeachment of the president until the White House tapes came out. And then they didn't. And you never had that smoking gun in this Donald Trump thing. And you never will, because it doesn't exist. Because you can't... You're impeaching him over a conversation. And the transcript for the conversation you're impeaching over was released immediately. There was no cover-up here. They let it all out. and because they realize this is nothing. And so there's the thing. We all have access to it. We all know what was said. We all know what was going on. We know it all. What else are we looking for? Very disheartening. Very disheartening week. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, Nancy Pelosi, I anticipate, maybe not this week, but next week when Congress is back in session, she's going to send the articles over to the Senate. Mitch McConnell's going to rush it through. Nothing's going to happen. We might touch on it after that, but that's about it. I think we're going to have to leave it here this week. We got a little breakdown. I am going to shorten them 20, 25 minutes for the talks, but probably 2 a week on 2 different topics. I feel like it's more digestible for people. Let me know. Feedback. Yes, yay, nay, positive, negative. I don't know. Seems like a good idea. They feel a little short. 25 minutes, it feels like a little short. Maybe I ramble. I don't know. My cadence, am I a slow talker? I don't know. But anyway, let me know. I need some feedback, whether or not people like the longer times or the shorter times. I feel like the shorter ones are a little more digestible. The longer ones can be a little more in-depth. I think it will kind of have to depend on the topic we're talking about, what we do. Because I feel like I could talk about this impeachment all day, but we're trying to keep it short. No book of the week this week. Your homework for the week is not to go read a book. Your homework is to spend some time with your family and enjoy the company of the people you love and do some shopping. Do some Christmas shopping. The commercialization of Christmas is ridiculous. It's a myth. Don't worry about it. Buy people gifts. Express your love to them in various ways. Gifts are a way to do that. If you have a problem with the commercialization of Christmas, you don't understand the spirit. The spirit of giving is a good thing. Now, consumerism, products, nonsense, we don't really need that stuff. But giving someone a gift is a good act. Your life shouldn't be filled with a bunch of objects objects don't provide value to your life. That's a way to phrase it. Objects do not provide value to your life. It's been shown happiness comes more from experiences than things. You buy a thing, you're happy for a bit, then you forget about it. You have an experience, every time you remember it, you're happy. Experiences are worth more than things. However, on Christmas, if you can give experiences, do that. Buy people tickets to things. Buy them. Have someone go to a float tank. Buy them a skydiving lesson or anything fun like that. Or just give them a gift. And it's the thought, the meaning of giving to somebody else that is important. But don't let anyone get you down about the commercialization of Christmas. Tell them to get in the spirit. Don't be a Scrooge. But no books. Spend time with your family. That's the homework for the week. And we're going to leave it there. I'm Tyler Chrestman. This has been the Chrestman Conversation. I hope you guys have a fantastic week and a Merry Christmas. I'll see you next week.